It's Lena Banks, certified financial planning professional and small business coach based here in Austin, Texas. Welcome back to your financial therapy for the week. Thanks as always for tuning in. And before we get started today, I need to ask you if you've been enjoying this show to please like, subscribe, give us a review wherever you're listening or watching. I'd really appreciate that. So let's get started with today's episode. Today's episode is all about lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation or lifestyle creep. And, we did an episode recently about drowning in debt. I know that was super popular. Everybody likes thinking about how they are not keeping up with their financial obligations, I know. But this episode, even though it is kind of in a similar vein, is meant to kind of get us thinking more mindfully about why that's happening. Why, as Americans, are we just spending more and more and more? And a big part of that, yes, inflation, regular inflation, and cost of living is going up, absolutely. And that affordability crisis is real, and it is something that we all have to grapple with. But I started thinking about why that is happening and why it's such a common denominator across really any income level. Every income level, no matter if you're making $25,000 a year or if you're making $250,000 a year, over this last year or so, couple of years, really since COVID, you have probably had to start adjusting your spending based on the reality of what's happening out there with all sorts of prices, gas prices, most recently, food, groceries, and healthcare. All of those things are going up exponentially. And so part of how we can deal with that is by being really mindful about lifestyle inflation. So let's define the term first so that we can start there. Lifestyle inflation refers to the increase in spending when an individual's income goes up. So it tends to rise whenever an individual gets a raise, starts a job where you're earning a little more income. Sometimes it's when you get out of college and you're finally in the real world and being a real professional. And really, lifestyle inflation is driven a lot by our peers, by what we perceive to be our new spending power. And so often just being mindful about the fact that lifestyle inflation is a thing, lifestyle creep is a thing, and doing things to kind of train your mind to not expand as is totally normal and natural, can be half the battle. So lifestyle inflation can make it difficult to get out of debt, to save for retirement, or meet your other big picture financial goals. It can cause you to get stuck in a cycle of living paycheck to paycheck where you just don't feel like you have enough money to live your life every month. And that's a real shame, especially when you do objectively have enough to cover your non-discretionary expenses, but you're maybe overspending on discretionary expenses, discretionary things outside of that. And what this looks like in a real life scenario is. One of the reasons why I started thinking about this in the first place was because I had this delicious bowl of ramen and I ordered it in and it cost, I'm embarrassed to even say, so I'll just, double digits times multiples, okay, to get everything that I wanted in this delicious bowl of ramen. And then today, I had, one of those ramen packets out of the standard old school rectangle packages. And it wasn't as good. It granted was not as delicious, but it got me thinking, man, this is like 1/10 of the price of getting this really super awesome takeout ramen. And that is the example of lifestyle creep. Because if I just needed the bowl of ramen, my discretionary expenses can be $3, or it can be upwards of $30, for when everything is said and done. So, thinking about those kinds of things are really important when it comes to how you're spending your money, how we're managing our money, and what's really important to you. Because the whole point is not that I don't have $20 or whatever it is to spend on ramen. The point is I could use that additional gap of $20 to invest or save or do something that actually would be more meaningful to me than having that super expensive fancy bowl of ramen. Now, I have to pause here and say, get your ramen, guys. If that is what makes you happy, and it made me very happy at the time, and I would do it again, do that thing, because that's important to understand that you can spend on things that actually bring real happiness into your life. The goal with this podcast is to help us start thinking about how much that actually does bring happiness into our life versus having that extra $20 to spend on something that maybe for you, because every personal finance is personal, so everyone has a different priority in their life. This show is about asking yourself the question of whether or not that spending actually brings happiness and joy into your life and therefore is something you're going to prioritize, or if really you should be eating the $3 ramen and spending that money elsewhere, right? So everybody's financial situation is different, but you can see how it's not just what you spend your money on is not just contingent upon what you can actually afford in your budget. If you want to budget for that $25, $30 ramen extravaganza, great. But if really what you should be budgeting for is $3 ramen and a nice movie, then you should do that instead. Okay, so that's what the point of this episode is about, to talk a little bit about lifestyle inflation and about how we can be more mindful when we have the opportunity to. So not shaming anybody, I want to talk a little bit about the common signs of lifestyle inflation. This is so common that financial planners are taught about this as something that does impact people very heavily in their emotional state, and it affects their financial decision making and their behavior going forward, because essentially it is a mindset that tells you, okay, I've gone from making $80,000 a year to, oh man, now I'm making six figures. That comes with a sense that I should be spending more because now I've reached a new tier. And that is the mindset that we have to kind of check when we are moving forward in our financial lives. So common signs of lifestyle inflation, these times where you're now earning more or you have access to more funds. Another huge area is when you have access to more credit, right? You become more credit worthy. And so now your spending limit on that credit card has gone from $1,000 to $10,000. And that feels really good. It makes you feel like you've got so much more spending power, and you do. But should you actually move forward with spending more money? That's the question. So, common signs of lifestyle inflation: spending. When you get an increase in pay or a promotion, your expenses seem to rise with every income increase, leaving very little extra for savings. It could also look like upgrading your possessions, so getting a new car, moving to a bigger house, even getting things like lawn service or maid service because now you can afford them, right? Increased daily spending, so more dining out, like the ramen example. Doing ride shares instead of taking your own car and being responsible about your alcohol intake. Getting premium subscriptions to things instead of freemium and paying or not paying as much and seeing some ads or things like that. If you get to the point where you're making more money, but you're still living paycheck to paycheck, you are not alone. That is not uncommon. Even with higher income, somehow that money just disappears. You might also find it to be really difficult to cut back. So in our debt episode, that is kind of the point, is that once you've gotten to a point where you're accustomed to doing certain things, it becomes very counterintuitive to pull back when you can still potentially afford those things. So instead of when inflation rises and your grocery bill goes up exponentially, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I can no longer afford groceries, saying, I can no longer afford the organic this and that of those groceries. I need to buy the generic of things that don't really matter to me. Like, I did it the other day, actually, Q-tips. Seeing that brand does something for us. But when that brand is costing you so much more, that's lifestyle inflation. And you can mitigate that by choosing lower priced products. Probably nobody listens to this show, not enough people, so I won't get in trouble for bashing the Q-tips. But in any case, so that's what lifestyle inflation looks like, is just feeling like you're on the same level no matter how much more you make. And that can become a real problem when your money isn't going as far, when there's real inflation at play, when you do have an increase in just cost of living, rent is higher, your mortgage, your tax rates go up. Those types of things really do necessitate paying attention to lifestyle inflation and not just kind of going with the flow of what's happening with you. So I want to talk about how you can maybe make this concept work in your favor and challenge you to do some thinking about where in your life lifestyle inflation is taking over, because it can really cut into how much you can actually save or invest of your dollars. And that means that your money just isn't working as hard for you as it actually could. So a lot of people, lifestyle inflation, they feel like they're rewarding themselves. They feel like, like I said, I'm making the money now, so I've got to show people that I'm making this money. It can also, as I mentioned, sometimes you establish yourself and businesses, banks are willing to give you credit because you've established yourself as a trustworthy earner. But if you're not careful with that, you can absolutely overspend and end up in debt that just drains your earning potential with those dollars going forward. So it's the risk of not being able to save more, but even worse, it's the risk of being more debt than you actually should or could be, or really have any business managing. And that's a really important point. A lot of times, your credit limits are way above what you should ever consider spending. And that is because you are credit worthy. But you shouldn't see that as an invitation to be spending that money, or even confirmation that people in your same position are spending that money. Don't use it as the way to keep up with the Joneses, because you don't know how much debt the Joneses actually have. So I'm going to give you a few tips on how to manage lifestyle inflation. I think it's really important, again, that we're just mindful of this concept, because it's not that this is a bad thing. You should reward yourself. But there are ways that you can do it in a manner that doesn't sabotage your future, especially when you potentially have gotten a really good boost and a really good opportunity for things to work in your favor going forward. So, very first thing, I know it will shock none of you, have a budget. If you have a budget, you really won't lose sight of what your priorities are, what's important for you. Create some level of a financial plan, financial goals with your financial partner, with your family, and or with your financial advisor. So once you have that budget in place, that plan in place, that shouldn't change without some serious thought. And it should be a very intentional conversation, a slow-moving conversation. Don't obligate yourself to bigger and bigger and bigger things before you actually think about what those bigger things are going to force you to give up. So if you move into a bigger house once you get that nice new job, you could actually be taking a step backward as far as your financial freedom overall, because your mortgage is higher. Maybe it's higher by more than you're actually making more of. And so focusing on what your priorities are right now, and that way, if and when your income does rise, you have a plan for where you're going, and you can take that extra income and more mindfully incorporate it into your financial picture. So have a budget. Don't lose sight of the priorities that are important to you or your overall financial goals. The second thing is to don't be afraid to say no. So just because you can get more credit or you do have more access to cash flow doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything that you can actually now afford. Tell yourself, your friends, your family, even your colleagues that what your intention is to use that gap in what you currently earn or used to earn and what you now earn, to enrich yourself, to make that money actually work for you. And it's a good opportunity to set your boundaries. Budgets are boundaries. And so if you've created that budget, if you've done step one, it makes that step two of not being afraid to say no a little bit easier. And the third thing is resist the urge to keep up with the Joneses. So I said, a lot of this lifestyle creep is about watching the other people around you, thinking that what you make needs to be signaled in a certain way to certain people. And so resisting that urge to be that person is very healthy. It allows you to set a more responsible example and be the person who potentially becomes a quiet millionaire instead of being flexing, ending up being broke, or not being able to participate in things when they come up and they actually are really important to you. So resisting that urge to do what you feel like or think everyone else is doing around you is super important. And the final thing is to be mindful about every dollar that you're going to be making over what you currently make. So you could automate your savings. You could budget more mindfully. You could increase your savings rate. If you do some of these things on the very, very front end, I promise you, you won't even miss those dollars because you've been living without them the whole time anyway. So, if it is your plan to get a larger home whenever you can afford it, that's something that you can grow into, you can make a mindful decision about, and you ostensibly are willing to sacrifice in other areas of your life in order to make that happen. It shouldn't be an and type of situation where you get the house and you get the car and you get the this and the that, because I can guarantee you that adding on that number of additional kind of things, making those types of changes all happening very quickly is the fastest way to literally eat up those extra dollars and then some. You can end up even more in debt than you already are, or even more behind than you already are. And so question your new purchases to see if they are truly needs or if they're wants. Are they part of your budget plan or are they not? So this has been just a quick conversation about lifestyle inflation or lifestyle creep. It happens to all of us, but the easiest way to not have it happen is to be conscious of the fact that it exists, and then to do the things that you know are going to keep you on track for what your current spending level is, but then adding in things that actually are on the path to your goals. So, first thing, have a budget. Don't lose sight of what your priorities are. Second thing, don't be afraid to say no to yourself, your family, your friends, your colleagues, anyone who is kind of signaling to you that, oh, yeah, let's spend a little more money. Be cognizant of that and understand that those extra dollars are not infinite. And that includes credit card companies, stores, anything like that is obviously trying to entice you to relinquish those dollars. The third thing is resist the urge to keep up with the Joneses and try and think about setting a better example. All of these folks who, made $50,000 for their whole life and they became a millionaire, they did that because they had the discipline to resist lifestyle creep. They found a place where they could live within their means, and anytime they had extra, they're putting it into investing and making those dollars work for them. And be mindful, automate what you're going to save from that extra amount early so that you don't even miss it. And if you can do all of those things, I guarantee you lifestyle inflation will not get you. And you can still treat yourself and celebrate your wins when they happen. And it will also be a lot easier to pull back in times where there are a lot of financial pulls, like actual inflation or like increases in cost of living that you cannot control. So this was a little lesson on lifestyle inflation. I hope you guys get something from it, and that you're kind of mindful about those opportunities when they arise so that you can bank some things instead of just spending into that extra money. So thanks so much. I'll be back next week with another episode.